but it was much more than a setting of the table. It was in and of itself a feast. And now we're going back for seconds and really looking forward to Dr. Fluker's address. This lecture was established by a group of generous folks who were interested in honoring the legacy and the life of two of Garrett's most distinguished alumni, James Cone and Emilie Towns, but perhaps more importantly, to also advance the conversation and the research and the work in the Black religious experience and Black religious thought. And that's what we hope to accomplish today, to honor that legacy and to advance that work and that legacy which has been entrusted to us. So welcome, thank you for being here. It's now my honor to present to you Dr. Reggie Blunt, who is our host for the evening, the director of our Center for the Church and the Black Experience, and the Murray H. Leifer Professor of Formation, Leadership, and Culture here at Garrett Seminary. Dr. Blunt.
Thank you, President Vieira, and thanks to all of you who have come to be a part of our second annual James Cone, Emilie Towns lecture. And we are so blessed to have another esteemed alum who will come and bring forth our lecture for today. This has been a great honor in being able to host this event. And again, I'm grateful for all of you who have made it through the snow to be here in person, and we are extremely grateful to those of you who are sharing with us virtually. The last count that I heard, we had well over 200 persons registered, and well over 150 plus of those being online. So we are just so grateful for all of you who are here. As part of my welcome, I want to again welcome with Dr. Walter Fluker, his partner, Dr. Sharon Fluker. I will have an opportunity to introduce Dr. Fluker a little bit later, but I just need you to know a little bit about what makes him as great as he is. Dr. Sharon Fluker serves as a consultant, and most recently she served in that role for the Black Lives Matter Task Force of the Society of Biblical Literature until 2022. She returned to Atlanta from Cambridge with her husband after serving in various capacities and positions there, including manager of the Center for Public Leadership at Harvard Kennedy School. And before those roles, she was senior advisor to the Salzburg Global Seminars and Mellows Fellows Community Initiative to enhance the global education initiatives at 36 selected historically Black colleges and universities and colleges of the Appalachian College Association. Early in her career, she was Assistant Dean of Admissions in the Graduate School of Vanderbilt, Dean for Sophomores and Director of Minority Student Affairs at the University of Rochester, Vice President of Doctoral Programs and Administration at the Fund for Theological Education, as well as Instructor of Political Science at several colleges and universities. She earned a BA from Spelman College and an MA and PhD from Northwestern University. And this is where the two met, one at Garrett, one at Northwestern. She is passionate about the mission of the Daughters and has given service to other nonprofit and educational boards. And along with loving travel and spending time, both of them love their grandchildren. They got pictures, y'all. Ask them. And so as we celebrate Dr. Walter Fluker being with us, I wanted us to also be able to celebrate his partner. Thanks again for all of you being here.
Good evening. I'm Dr. Kate Ott, Director of the Stead Center for Ethics and Values here at Garrett. I want to begin by noting the walk that is around you, the Howard Thurman Meditative Walk. So if you were not able to take advantage of that earlier today, please take a moment to read the quotes, see the publications by Howard Thurman in celebration of Black History Month. Those of you online, if you'd like to take a meditative walk in an online gallery, you're welcome to go to the Stead Center on YouTube, and you'll see that as our first video, a meditative walk with the life and history of Howard Thurman. I was supposed to be introducing Reverend Dr. Julian Armand Cook today. Less than a week ago, at 2:30 p.m. in the afternoon on February 7th, a U-Haul van full of neo-Nazis started a demonstration on a bridge between the predominantly white Evandale neighborhood and the historic Black neighborhood, Lincoln Heights, in Cincinnati, Ohio. The white supremacist demonstrators were met by members of the Lincoln Heights neighborhood who mobilized to keep them from crossing the bridge only 700 feet from an elementary school. While there was a police presence, their operating principle was one of, there are good people on both sides. Reverend Dr. Julian Armand Cook will not be present today with us. He is the senior pastor of Lincoln Heights Missionary Baptist Church, and the preacher many of you may have seen leading the group of Black citizens in prayer after they pushed the neo-Nazi group back into their van, refusing to let them cross the bridge. Standoffs like this are not new. We are almost 60 years past the brutal Bloody Sunday beatings of the civil rights marchers on the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama. Thank God, physical violence did not ensue this past Friday. Standoffs like this are not new. Lincoln Heights is the first self-governing African-American community north of the Mason-Dixon line. It is one of the only places African-Americans claimed their 40 acres and a mule. There is a reason neo-Nazis targeted this portion of the city. There is a reason its citizens could mobilize quickly and with purpose. There is a reason one of the first calls was to their pastor, Reverend Dr. Julian Cook. So as he prioritizes his community's need for healing and safety, we stand with them as they call for justice and accountability. Would you please join me in prayer? God with us, we call upon you to stand with the community in Lincoln Heights. As days without justice stretch on, as residents fear for their safety, as the community is strengthened in their shared resolve. God with us, hear their cries for justice. Compel each of us to be moved beyond complacency, to action in our communities against the insidiousness of white supremacy, to faithful uprooting of our own biases and judgments, to live the uncomfortable call of Jesus in transformative ways. God with us, hear our cries for justice. May it be so. May it be so. Amen.
Preachers and teachers would make their appeal, fighting as soldiers on great battlefields, when to their pleadings my poor heart did yield. All I can say, there is something within me that holdeth the reins, something within me that banishes pain, something within me I cannot explain. All that I know, there is something within. Have you that something, that burning desire? Have you that something that never doth tire? Oh, if you have it, that heavenly fire, then let the world know there is something within. Something within me that holdeth the reins, something within me that banishes pain, something within me I cannot explain. All that I know, there is something within. I met God one morn, my soul feeling bad, heart heavy laden with a bowed down head. He lifted my burden, made me so glad. All that I know, there is something within, something within me that holdeth the reins, something within me that banishes pain, something within me I cannot explain. All that I know, there is something within, something within me that holdeth the reins, something within me that banishes pain, something within me I cannot explain. All that I know, there is something within. All that I know, there is something within. All that I know, there is something within.
So I feel like the preacher coming through me. All that I know. All that I know. Anybody know what I'm talking about? All that I know. There is something within. Wadafo, thank you. I have the, again, honor and privilege of introducing the James Cone Emily Towns lecturer for this year, the Reverend Dr. Walter Earl Fluker. And for the benefit of those who are sharing with us online and who don't have the printed version, allow me to quickly share this brief bio. Dr. Fluker is the senior editor of the Howard Thurman Papers Project and a well-known figure in the theory and practice of ethical leadership. Dr. Fluker holds a position of Distinguished Professor of Howard Thurman Center at Hartford International University for Religious and Peace, and previously served as Dean's Professor of Spirituality, Ethics, and Leadership at Emory University's Candler School of Theology. At Morehouse College, he was the founding director of the Andrew Young Center for Global Leadership and the Coca-Cola Professorship of Leadership Studies. He is the Martin Luther King Jr. Emeritus of Ethical Leadership at Boston University and the editor of the Howard Thurman Papers Project, where he developed an acclaimed massive online operating course titled Ethical Leadership, Character, Civility, and Community. His organization, Walter Earl Fluker and Associates, continues to advance this mission. A sought-after consultant, speaker, and workshop leader, Dr. Fluker has shared his expertise at various institutions and organizations worldwide. Recently, he was honored with the 2023 Roosevelt Institute's Four Freedoms Award of Worship, along with Speaker Emeritus Nancy Pelosi, the late activist Adi Barkan, Congressman Benny Thompson, and former executive director of the American Library Association, Tracy D. Hall. Dr. Fluker is a prolific author with notable works including Ethical Leadership, The Quest for Character, Civility, and Community, and The Ground Has Shifted, The Future of the Black Church in Post-Racial America. He also edited the 5-volume documentary edition, The Papers of Howard Washington Thurman, the 4-volume Walking with God, the sermon series of Howard Thurman, and The Unfinished Search for Common Ground. He earned a BA in Philosophy and Biblical Studies from Trinity College, an MDiv from Garrett-Evangelical Theological Seminary, and a PhD in Social Ethics from Boston University. He holds an honorary Doctor of Humanities from Leeds McRae College and a Doctor of Laws honoris causa from Boston University. Now, on a personal note, I've had the blessing of Dr. Walter Fluker being a friend and a mentor, my God, almost 30 years. It was in his role as the leader, the founding director of the Andrew Young Center for Global Leadership and the Coca-Cola Professorship of Leadership Studies at Morehouse College that I had an opportunity to meet him, because he was at that time still emerging even more as a Howard Thurman scholar. And between him and Dr. Luther Smith, they helped me fall in love with Thurman. I am grateful for his mentorship over the course of these many years and his friendship. And so it is a great honor for me as the director of the Center for the Church and the Black Experience to welcome Walter home and to have him provide to us the James Cone and Emily Town Lecture. Won't you give him a hand?
I brought all my stuff up here just in case, because I'm a very insecure person. Thank you, Dr. Blunt, You make things so easy for me. I think that's one of your extraordinary gifts to the world, is that you make things easy for people. Before I say anything else, thank you, Sharon. Thank you. We died, but you who live must do a harder thing than dying is. You must think, and ghost will drive you on. Memories crowd the audience room as we gather in this sacred space. So many faces and experiences churn in my spirit each time I return to this site of memory. Professors, mentors, fellow students, and cherished friends. Some still with us, and others dearly departed. I'm remembering especially Dr. Heisel B. Taylor, Dr. Maceo Woods, Bishop Edsel Ammons, his beloved Helen Fannings Ammons, Dr. Larry Murphy, and so many more. I could take up all of our time. But ghosts visit me in this space. In the following lecture, Congregating, Conjuring, and Conspiring in Commons at Crossings, James H. Cone, Emily Marine Towns, and the call to wake up running. We will explore the legacies of these two great souls within the framework of Black theology and womanist ethics. These great Garrett alumni bring honor to us as we honor them for their contributions to theology and ethics, which I will refer to as theoethics, a term that Emily Towns has popularized. Along with these two juggernauts of the Black theological and womanist traditions, there are so many others worthy of mention, but the economy of time does not allow. Let it suffice to say thank you again, Reverend Dr. Reginald Blunt, and your wonderful team. You have a team. Velma Frankel, Candace Simpson, Dr. Kate Ott, Jansen Steffen, President, of course, Dr. Javier A. Vieira, a servant leader. It's so clear that this guy's a servant leader. He's not trying to blow a horn. He just shows up and finds out what he can do to help us get through. Thank you, President, for honoring me with this invitation, and thank you, Dr. Anne Marie Mingo, for your excellent presentation today. I've been helped, no, as they say in the church, I've been helped by you. I begin with a very familiar passage of scripture, and I'm not going to bore you today, so, but I'm not going to promise you like some Baptist preachers do. They say, well, you know what Elizabeth Taylor said to her last husband. I won't hold you long. I won't promise that. I will stand at my watch and station myself on the ramparts. I will look to see what he will say to me and what answer I am to give to this complaint. Write down the revelation. and make it plain on tablets so that a herald may run with it. For the revelation awaits an appointed time. It speaks of the end and will not prove false. Though it linger, wait for it. It will certainly come and will not delay. See, the enemy is puffed up. His desires are not upright. But the righteous person will live by their faithfulness. First time I read this scripture was at my second sermon, and I pronounced the prophet's name Habakkuk. Everybody in the church laughed. I still have issues with that, so if that slips, that was traumatizing experience. Habakkuk, the second chapter, verses 2 through 4. I spent most of my life literally and metaphorically running. From my earliest days here on the south side of Chicago, running from gang-toting street gangs who needed to prove their manhood, from ubiquitous presences of police, from white boy terrorists in Mayor Daley's neighborhood, and from powerful clandestine puppeteers who hide behind the curtains of social fiction and set up, manipulate, and perpetuate the dramas that hold us all in bondage to lies, trickery, and post-colonial nightmares. I would add that at least my compulsion to run, hopefully you too, is not necessarily a deficiency in character, nor is it an attribute that always suggests fear, dread, and terror. Sometimes it is an intuitive drive to explore new possibilities beyond what is given. Thus, a clear, almost clairvoyant sensibility drives me to the task of returning to running, not only as a personal, historical, and literary trope, but as a theological and ethical call to a new generation of leaders who will need to wake up every morning on the run. The gazelle runs according to the old African proverb. The gazelle and all creatures of the savannah, they wake up running every morning. The gazelle runs to avoid becoming breakfast for some pride of lions, and the lions run to feed their family. Every creature in the savannah wakes up running because of the precariousness of existence, and so must we. However, there's more at stake than implied in this predator-prey dynamic. We must not run in fear, but in faith towards the other and the good futures that we can only imagine. This is a decidedly spiritual undertaking at the dangerous and maddening crossings of this moment in democratic life, as an ominous cloud of a revived colonial specter of authoritarianism and chaos covers the land like an encroaching fog. It was Martin Luther King Jr. who over 60 years ago spoke to the urgency of now. Now more than ever, we need to heed his clarion call to make real the promises of democracy in this nation and beyond. We must create communities of discourse and practice that acknowledge our real and distinct differences and yet seek new ways to live together. And if possible, run together and embrace our differences for the urgent moment at hand. I think this is possible because of our religious and social productions of reality, because they're always contextual and constructive. We must therefore be diligent, vigilant, flexible, and adaptive. We must congregate, conjure, and conspire in commons, at crossings, as we wake up running. I know you all are an academic place. I went to school here, so I'm going to share with you a few sources and definitions. Is that okay? So I earn my keep. I employ the metaphor of running throughout as a liberative task, practice for a new generation of leaders on the run. There are two sources for my thinking regarding running as an appropriate sign for our time. One is my reading of the 7th century BCE, before the Common Era text, from Habakkuk above. For Habakkuk, there is a deep urgency, a sense of urgency, as the prophet sees the utter destruction of the people under the assault of the Babylonians. In the first chapter, they, and I'm using they intentionally, raise a cry of desperation and ask, how long will this last? As they accuse God of not listening and tolerating such gross evil while the enemy hems in the righteous. In verses 2 through 4 of the second chapter, in a view from the ramparts, the battlements, they get a glimpse of the divine response to the complaint in the form of a runner, a herald who carries the vision to the people, a vision that Habakkuk must write and publish that is so plain the people cannot miss it. There's also the caution in the revelation that it will take a while. It won't happen overnight, so you mustn't give up. And there's an added note that speaks to the divine activity in this awful moment that calls the prophet and the people to courage. See, the enemy is puffed up. Like the big Pillsbury Doughboy, puffed up, arrogant, conceited, so puffed up he's silly. His desires are not upright, but the righteous person will live by their faithfulness. A young 16th century Common Era Augustinian monk heard this ancient word quoted in Romans 1:17, woke up running, and it ignited a revolution in the Roman Catholic Church that we now call the Protestant Reformation. The second source is from Octavia Butler's 1993 novel, The Parable of the Sower, which tells the story of Lauren Oya Alamina, who is on the run because of the political and social chaos taking place in 2024. Wow. She is a runaway who embodies the role of a bricoleur, like in bricoleur, a resourceful individual who identifies available materials and repurposes them for survival. Her runaway bag, like her ancestors, contains essential items for her journey north. The name Oya is derived from the Yoruba goddess of rebirth and life. And Lauren Oya, a young black woman, started out at 15 years old, leads a small community of diverse individuals through many crossings of destruction and death to new life and possibilities. They rally around common purposes, a commons, which may or may not continue in the future. But they address the precarious moment at hand. Are y'all with me? You know, it's going to take a while, and you know, when I used to teach at Morehouse, colleges is a little different, right? The brothers at Morehouse, they get sleepy quick, right? So I used to tell them, just stand up and scream, man. It's okay. You can't sleep when you're screaming. And if you need to do it, just do it. You know, it's okay. We good here. Both Habakkuk and Octavia Butler place a premium on running, watching, and writing like you did today, Dr. Mingle, presenting them as expressions of a unified consciousness. Throughout, therefore, I'm playing with and privileging the notion of running, as in running away and running to, which are encapsulated in the language of runagate. According to Vincent Wimbush, the term runagate is an alternate form of renegade, from the Middle Latin renegatus, meaning fugitive or runaway. It has come to carry the meaning of a more transgressive act than mere flight. It is maroonage, as in maroon, running away with an attitude and a plan, taking flight in body, but even more importantly, in terms of consciousness, as in awakening to one's path to freedom. Thus, I present running as a spiritually liberating practice as we reimagine democratic futures in this season of contested political and religious spaces. Religious scholars and church leaders need to begin with the basic consideration that our ethical projects have always been and will continue to arise from lived religious and social experiences, not from the exalted hierarchical dominance of master classes whose ideological and cultural narratives of supremacy and fascism portend a shadowy and hazardous future for the least of these. Our interpretive and activist tasks are contextual and constructive, which means that our visions of democracy must resist not only oppressive constructions of deadly theological and ethical discourses, but also corporatism and empire that feed on the fears, prejudices, and ignorance of many of our citizens who have been lulled to sleep by vast and complex systems of technology and communication in the name of America first and xenophobic beliefs of white supremacist logic and protocol. For this urgent moment, when we are witnessing the forced migration of our brothers and sisters, the dismantling of the separation of powers of religion and state, and the empowerment of a plutocracy where winners take all, we must insist upon diversity, equity, multiplicity, openness, and dynamism. In other words, friends, we must do our theology and ethics on the run. In the following, I got a few more definitions. This is not boring you, is it? Because there's a place in hell where everybody is bored. It's in the farthest corners of hell. You know, with Benedict Arnold and all the other traitors, Brutus, and everybody be saying, well, what am I going to do today? What we going? Because there ain't nothing to do. Okay, in the following, just a few more definitions. I use interrelated gerunds. You know, remember composition, English composition? You know, these are verbs that are acting like nouns and nouns that are acting like verbs. I like to see stuff like that get mixed up, don't you? I use interrelated gerunds of congregating, conjuring, and conspiring as tools of the Spirit. I borrowed that from Thurman, found in our runaway bags. Let me say that again. I use interrelated gerunds of congregating, conjuring, and conspiring as tools of the Spirit, found in our runaway bags. They act as methods of resistance, reconstruction, and reimagining that empower communities to traverse oppressive forces and to construct new democratic futures. Congregating is a collective act of resistance, reconstruction, and reimagining. Congregating. As the old African proverb says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Congregating, congere, signals gatherings, connecting, binding, and coming together and running away from oppressive and restrictive ideological, religious, and cultural bondage, and running to new imagined futures of justice and human and non-human flourishing. Religious leaders like you all, scholars like you all, and those in our digital space today, and congregations, churches, mosques, temples, synagogues, shrines, have excellent opportunity to begin this work by acknowledging and receiving the voices and visions of the new movements of the Spirit in our midst. Congregating in this contemporary context involves running to by creating and appreciating spaces of difference with empathy, respect, and justice. Different forms and styles of emergent leadership, whether socially and politically disrespected, dismissed, excluded, impure, grotesque, can gather in our diasporic and exilic quest for home. Home. Congregating is accompanied by conjuring. I spent a lot of time with African healers in the 90s and just lost my last good friend a year or two ago, Malidoma Patrice Somé. They know a little something about conjuring. Little this is part of it, but I'm trying to break it down for us. Y'all with me? Can you feel this? Erykah Badu said, can you feel that? Okay, so. Conjuring is a tool of the Spirit that signifies acts of commitment, covenanting to struggle, resist, and repair. Conjuring, in its most basic sense, is an act of cultural remixing and resistance, kind of like your boy at the Super Bowl, allowing communities to reclaim histories and identities through remembering, storytelling, improvisation, embodied performance akin to jazz or hip hop, and bodily engagement against systems that assault humanity. It challenges rigid epistemologies and fosters a shared consciousness that transcends oppressive frameworks. These are political performances. Hear that, say that again, Walter. These are political performances that with each movement, beat, lyric, and sound dances to its own sense of time, connecting, splitting verses, and generating inclusive spaces, opportunities, and invitations to others to join in new creation. Are you with me? Honestly, I'm Baptist. I have to know that. I know this is a lecture. I know you're intellectual, but let your body speak. To echo Edouard Glissant, the great Martinique philosopher, historian, literary figure, he says this is errant thinking, not nomadic thinking that is linear, that just drags everything with it in the desert and in the cave. No, this is errant thinking, like wandering thinking. And he says it is the postulation of an unyielding and an unfading sacred, a poetics of relation that we experience on the run into strange territory without a map. I'm almost through with the definitions. Just guess how much more I have after this. See, I'm almost there. Conspiring. 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 In its older meaning of breathing together, emphasizes collective struggle against neoliberal and exclusionary forces, uniting scholars, activists, and religious leaders in the creation of a new commons at crossings. Those dangerous, often deathly liminal spaces where past, present, and future intersect. These spiritual tools that I'm talking about converge at crossings, forging transformative encounters that redefine belonging, democracy, and transcendence. People don't like that word anymore, but I'm slipping it in because I think it's important. True liberation lies in embracing the flux of history and the infinite possibilities of becoming, where memory, resistance, and hope shape a future rooted in justice and communal flourishing. You know, our biblical stories are replete with prophets and others who woke up running and encountered ghostly visitations at crossings. Those liminal spaces fraught with danger, peril, and possibility. Moses woke up running away from Pharaoh's house and hid out in the Midian desert until he bumped into a fiery bush at crossings and returned to Egypt to liberate his people. Elijah woke up running from Ahab and Jezebel after he called fire from heaven on Mount Carmel and hid in the wilderness until Yahweh summoned him to cross the desert near Damascus and appoint a new order of government and religion. Jacob woke up running from Esau and crossed the brook of Jacob, where he bumped into a night demon that anointed his future as Israel, the prince of the nations. Rahab, the Canaanite, hid two spies on the run at the crossings of Jericho, and her extended family escaped doom by waiting inside a house marked with a red thread. Hagar was on the run, crossing the desert of Paran with her infant child, escaping from Abraham and Sarah, and was met by an angel at a spring of water who told her to return home and promised her that she would become the mother of a great people. David woke up running from the terror of Saul and crossed over into the precincts of Adullam and hid in a cave and returned as king of Israel and Judah. Yes, even those frightened disciples woke up running after the crucifixion. They were running too. And crossed into their destinies on the day of Pentecost, where the Holy Ghost of wind and fire scattered them to the corners of the earth, witnessing and testifying to what they had seen and heard. Crossings are important. Dangerous. Dangerous. Our greatest theological leaders of the past century did their theology on the run. During the civil rights movement, which, again, Dr. Mingo did such an excellent job of lifting up the ordinary black women in the movement. They were extraordinary, by no means ordinary, but just in the everydayness. During the civil rights movement, Otis Redding's 1961 satirical lyrics about Martin Luther King Jr. in Alabama, Shout Bama Lama, best describes the context in which black religious leaders did their theologizing. A verse from the song goes like this. The preacher and the deacon were praying one day. Along came a bear coming down the way. The preacher told the deacon to say a prayer. He said, Lord, a prayer won't kill this bear. I got to make it, baby. Shout, Bama Lama. I got to run for it. Well, well, well. Nobody going to set him down. He's down in Alabama. We shall be free. Oh, my people, my people, my people. They just be doing things with words. They just throw them all kind of ways and they come together. Look at that. These religious scholars and church leaders' contextual and constructive tasks grew out of their immediate present, where new and unexpected prophets and teachers woke up running. Oppressed and colonized people began their liberative task by responding to the primary theological and ethical question of context. What's going on? What's up? I often share with my students that Marvin Gaye was not the first to ask that question. What's going on? Black theology and all intentional liberatory theologies are contextual and constructive practices in God talk, in reconceptualizing, in reinterpreting and reimagining text, narratives, language, signs, and symbols about divine activity in situ. Our progenitors of Black theological discourse and practice constructed their theologies on the run. It was none other than the father of Black theology, the late, great Dr. James Hal Cone, who said it this way. He writes, "The theme of liberation, expressed in story form, is the essence of Black religion. Both the content and form were essentially determined by Black people's social existence. When Christianity was taught to them and they began to read the Bible, Blacks simply appropriated those stories that met their historical need. This is why some things are stressed and others are overlooked. They did not debate religion on an abstract theological level, but lived their religion concretely in history." Just a minute or two on James Cone. You know, this is close to me. The last time I got a letter or email at least from James Cone was shortly before his death. I released The Ground That Shifted, and I know he wanted to argue with me because what I did to Exodus. James Cone was a runner. I mean, literally, every morning he'd get up and run. Anybody ever seen James Cone? He's just a runner for my people. Cone's critical observation that I've just quoted grows out of his own wrestling with scripture, tradition, and the lived experiences of African Americans in his construction of Black theology. In 1969, when James H. Cone released Black Theology and Black Power, shock waves of resistance shook the Black church and frightened the white churches of America. At the core of his proclamation was a revisitation of what it means to be saved. What constitutes salvation in the Christian church? For Cone, personal salvation that was not connected to collective action in the quest for justice and liberation was a non sequitur. In fact, for him, salvation was liberation. And all who claim to follow Jesus, he said, must also claim solidarity with the poor, left out and left behind of our society. He woke up running from Bearden, Arkansas to Shorter College and Philander Smith College in Little Rock, all the way north up here to Garrett-Theological Seminary and Northwestern University. He later returned to Philander Smith College and traveled north again to Adrian College in Michigan before assuming his post at Union Theological Seminary in 1970, where in 1977 he was awarded the distinguished Charles A. Briggs Chair in Systematic Theology. The rest is history. He ran so fast with such energy and rage about justice that he only stopped long enough to let his soul look back and wonder in 1982. Cone's massive corpus of writings and speeches over 50 years were etched out of struggle. His is a splendid example of what it means to congregate, conjure, and conspire in commons at crossings. He was a runner, watcher, writer who called people of African descent in the United States to wake up and run with him. His theological language was framed by questions from the social context of the 60s in the United States and with an explicit correlation of Black experience, scripture, tradition, and Jesus Christ. That's that Bartian thing, whom he identified as their subject or essence. His first two books, every student in seminary ought to read Cone. Just read. So I'm gonna give you a little lesson here. Now, you might get mad because I'm gonna tell you everything I know about Cone. But his first two books, Black Theology and Black Power, 1969, A Black Theology of Liberation, 1970, spoke powerfully to the need to understand the relationship of Jesus Christ to the resistance against racism in American culture and society, and God's identification and faithfulness to Black and poor people. That's a word, y'all. The early Cone, as I interpret this period, is polemical, reactionary, and angry. I came to Garrett, I was very angry. He reflected the spirit of the times. People were angry. I mean, kind of angry now, but they don't know how to express it like we did. Let your hair grow. Let your love show. Wear your dashi. Like the runner in Habakkuk, he saw the vision and made it plain so that all could see it. Thus, he began a long career of writing, publishing, and proclaiming on the run. His theology rejected a colorless God, arguing instead for divine identification with the struggles of Black people. He refused to apologize for his iconoclastic language. He saw his task as giving theological interpretation to Black power and consequently tearing down the idol gods that oppressed Black people had internalized. In this nascent stage in Black theology, his prophetic voice was primarily a challenge to white theology during this tumultuous period of social disruption. Cone's treatment of God as Black and God's identification with the struggles of Black people met with mixed reactions, both within white and Black Christian communities. I had a pastor out in Waukegan, he didn't want anything to do with Cone. Not at all. He'd just get mad anytime I say Cone's name. Cone's assertion that God is Black, I always thought God was Black, but anyway, I don't want to mess y'all up. Cone's assertion that God is Black and takes sides with the oppressed sparked controversy and resonated deeply in the aftermath of assassinations of civil rights leaders like Medgar Evers, 1963, Malcolm X, 1965, and Martin Luther King Jr., 1968, not to name all of those countless women who got left out of the record, and queer people who got left out of the record. In The Spiritual and the Blues, 1972, he continued his run by exploring the spirituals, the sorrow songs, and their secular counterparts, the blues, as sources for theological reflection on the African American experience of oppression. Cone sought sources that were indigenous to the experience of African Americans in order to conjure a new narrative for his people. He contended that the sources and norms of white theology reflected the exploitative nature and consequent alienation in the Euro-Western cultures. This method was also utilized in a more systematic formulation in God of the Oppressed, 1975. He continued this trajectory in Black theology, edited with the late Gayrod Wilmore in 1979. Later, he writes My Soul Looks Back and Wonders, 1982, For My People, 1984, and Speaking the Truth in 1987. He was writing, folks. He was a writer. John was a writer. In the book of Revelation, John was a writer. For my people, Cone offers a historical overview and a critical analysis of black theology For my people. As he retraced his own thought and black theology in general, he identified both its strengths and its weaknesses. The strengths, faith, struggle, black history, and ecumenism, and its weaknesses, including black theologians' negative overreaction to white racism and inadequate analysis of socioeconomic and gender oppression. He observed that the greatest weakness had been the departure of black theology to white seminaries, universities, and churches. Let me say that again, because I know you're getting sleepy now, I want to make sure you got that. He observed that the greatest weakness had been the departure of black theology to white seminaries, universities, and churches. The crucial question for him was, and still is, how could black theology retain its black identity by directing its message primarily to whites? A more difficult and related matter, according to Cone, was its failure to speak a liberating word to the black church. I'm quoting, to the victims so they can begin to build autonomous institutions that will bear witness to God's intention to deliver the poor from poverty. Ignoring black churches, he says, we ignored the presence of black power in the black community. Maybe that's something we can take out. Might be a good time to go back to this. Cone's interest here is in congregating. We might ask him, what is at stake when we gather in the name of the liberator of Nazareth? What are our conversations, discussions, deliberations, and decisions? A major task for black churches and their allies in this new season of struggle is the need to come together in commons and critically reflect on our situation, context, conditions, constituents, and to self-assess, take an inventory, step back, and ask the hard questions about where we are and what our visions and goals are for this time, because they're coming for us. Are they achievable? Are they centered on the liberating message of Jesus Christ, or are they merely self-development campaigns and prosperity gospels that feed on the anxieties and torments of neoliberal captivity? Cone models for us what is at stake in this self-critical approach that is integral to congregating, conjuring, and conspiring in commons at crossings. And for my people, he devotes entire chapters to 4 major concerns. Hopefully we can take away. He repented. He was self-critical. He repented from his own complicity in the degradation of black women in the church and called for the inclusion of black women's voices. I think Emily Towns, I know Dolores Williams was around there. That helped him. He spoke to the relationship between black theology and liberation theologies in America. We now call them decolonial struggles. And underscored the need for congregating in solidarity in commons across cultural and ideological lines. He insisted that this may well be the most refreshing and rewarding enterprise among the poor and exploited peoples of the earth. If we dare, he suggests, to conspire, breathe together in spirit, in commons with other sisters and brothers, trans and queer, diverse, human and non-human bodies, we might see the possibility and promise of a new Pentecost at the crossings that we will surely encounter on the run. Do y'all need a little time? Do you need to stretch a little bit? You okay? I'm serious. You good? You know, I'm very insecure. You're looking at me. And, you know, okay, I just want to know. Third, he also emphasized the need for solidarity among ethnic minorities. Look out, Garrett, within American society, and lists several developments that invited Black theology into creative and challenging dialogue. Cone called for an open, robust, and honest conversation with our allies within U.S. territorial boundaries, reaching and stretching across geopolitical lines, inviting all who dared to join him on the run. Fourth, finally, he acknowledged his reliance on Marxian analysis that was used to critique political and economic oppression, but he remained cautious about the Eurocentric biases within Marxist thought. Black people had a long struggle with that. Some of y'all might know that we've had a long struggle with Marxist thought. We like it. When Cornel West says it sounds better. When Bell Hooks would hit it, it would sound better. But we've always been kind of suspicious. Cone called for decolonizing methodologies to address the inherited biases within theological and academic frameworks. Black students and other students just learn to have a little suspicion. We might ask ourselves as we congregate, conjure, and conspire in these post-colonial crossings regarding the tools and critical approaches that assist in the task of decolonizing methodologies. How do we ask the difficult questions about inherited perceptions, schemas, practices, habitus that we bring to tools that we use to frame the questions, the problems, issues, strategies, and common visions and goals without falling into ideological and often ethnocentric traps that we set for ourselves? That's a whole class. We bring our own life worlds and practices to methods, and we must therefore be aware that the other really is other in ways that may call our approaches into question. And I think that many of the post-colonial theologians and places and spaces that are not Europe and America are helping us to get this if we pay attention. Cone's later works, Martin and Malcolm in America, 1991, and Risk of Faith, 1999, extended his analysis by exploring the legacies of Martin King and Malcolm X, as well as the broader trajectory of Black theology over 3 decades. In The Cross and the Lynching Tree, Cone made a powerful theological connection between the crucifixion of Christ and the lynching of Black bodies in America. And he argued that understanding the cross, for me, crossing, through the lens of the lynching tree is essential to comprehending Christian identity and confronting the legacy of white supremacy. The Cross. His final book, said I wasn't going to tell nobody, 2018, encapsulates his life work with a prophetic call for unity and justice. Cone emphasized the necessity of treating all human beings with dignity and respect, echoing in some ways King's belief. In fact, he closes with, "We must learn to live together or perish as fools." He says, I choose life. His theological legacy challenges contemporary theologians, scholars, faith leaders, and especially leaders who are emerging to continue engaging in both theoretical debates and practical struggles for justice on the run. Cone's work remains a call to action, running, watching, writing, and urging communities to critically assess their commitments and work toward liberation for all oppressed people. How then might we, as Cone suggests in this earlier quote, appropriate the great biblical stories and lessons of antiquity and refashion them to our social existence and historical needs? Of course, religious and theological scholars have responded to Cone's legacy in a variety of ways, but none has spoken more clearly to how the experience of lived religion of African Americans informs theoethical responses to moral frameworks and decision-making within the church and society than Emilie Maureen Towns. Are y'all ready for Emilie Maureen Towns? I don't know if anybody ever is quite ready for Emilie Maureen Towns. Ethics as an art of doing the work our souls must have. Emilie Towns woke up running and raced past segregated statues, the residue of Jim Crow, and the triple oppression of black women in Durham, North Carolina, to become a trailblazer for womanist justice and hope in the academy and the church. She pressed her way through the University of Chicago for her bachelor's, master's, and doctorate in ministry degrees, and decided that she needed more in her runaway bag. So she dropped by Garrett Northwestern, who wouldn't, and picked up a PhD and kept on running. On the run, she began her early work as assistant, associate, and then full professor of social ethics at St. Paul School of Theology, the Carolyn Williams Byrd Professor of Christian Ethics at Union Theological Seminary, the Andrew W. Mellon Professor of African American Religion and Theology at Yale University Divinity School, and in the fall of 2005, she became the first woman to serve as Associate Dean for Academic Affairs at Yale Divinity School, and the first African American woman during that time elected as president of the American Academy of Religion. Look what you've been doing, Garrett. You might have thought she would settle there, but running is in Emilie's DNA. She ran on to the positions of Dean and Distinguished Professor of Womanist Ethics and Society at Vanderbilt University Divinity School in 2013. Again, the first African American to serve in that capacity. In 2024, she decided to make another trek to New England to Boston University as the Martin Luther King Jr. Professor of Religion and Black Studies and the first African American woman to serve as the president of the Society of Christian Ethics. Over the jagged terrain of her long distance and productive marathon from 1993 to present, she has perfected what she calls ethics as an art of doing the work our souls must have. In her remarkable corpus of monographs and edited works that span the intersections of womanist ethics, theology, social justice, health, education, spirituality, and the cultural production of evil, she has delved deeply into what it means to wake up running and to congregate, conjure, and conspire in commons at crossings. While running, she continues to honor the call to write the vision and make it plain so that we who run can read it. From Womanist Justice, Womanist Hope, 1993, In a Blaze of Glory, Womanist Spirituality as Social Witness, 1995, Embracing the Spirit, Womanist Perspectives on Hope, Salvation, and Transformation, 1997, Breaking the Fine Reign of Death, African American Health Care and a Womanist Ethic of Care, 1998, and Womanist Ethics and the Production of Evil, 2006. She has been shadowboxing with the ridiculous, which was the title of her 2025 Society for Christian Ethics presidential address. There she demonstrates her artful role as a conjurer of texts and traditions, recurating, reimagining, and transforming the lived experience of Black women, and she likes to bracket and men, and imaginatively refashioning them into creative tools for interpreting, reconfiguring, and infusing new life into worn out and unusable signs. In her own inimitable prose, Towns writes this. She says, "To shadowbox with the ridiculous, the shocking, the outrageous, the indecent, the horror is to engage in deep and passionate commitment to teach, research, write, and speak out of a fierce determination to help our students and ourselves imagine that we are human." Important for this discussion are the ways in which Towns, in her most popular work, Womanist Ethics and the Cultural Production of Evil, demonstrates how stereotypes of black women, such as Aunt Jemima, Sapphire, the tragic mulatto, Mammy, and Jezebel, have been utilized to exclude, reshape, and determine how societal perceptions of black women perpetuate their marginalization. By conjuring these narratives through what she calls counter-memory, hidden and canceled narratives are remembered and retold in creative and imaginative ways so that the binary distinction between history as scientific and memory as subjective both become personal and subjective. Don't miss that. Thus, she calls attention to and disrupts the historical roots of vicious master narratives and the ongoing impact they have on contemporary understandings of black women. In doing so, she emphasizes that black women must wake up running, not only to navigate these stereotypes, but also to reclaim and redefine their identities in a society that often seeks to erase and render them non-specific. She writes, "I'm interested in exploring the depths of African American life, female and male. For it is in exploring these depths, in taking seriously my particularity, not as a form of essentialism, but as epistemology, where I can meet and greet others, for we are intricately and intimately interwoven in our postmodern culture." Towns thus provides us with language to better understand, engage, and decenter these master narratives in her rendering of the fantastic hegemonic imagination. Can you say that without spitting? Say, fantastic hegemonic imagination. Turn to your neighbor and duck neighbor, say, fantastic hegemonic imagination. This fantastic hegemonic imagination is the force behind the cultural production of evil. And she says, and it is within us all. She combines Michel Foucault's notion of fantasia in the library with Antonio Gramsci's concept of hegemony to construct the concept of the fantastic hegemonic imagination. This idea, that's Conjuring, this idea points to the subtle ways in which ghostly, symbolic cultural forms often lie hidden in unsuspecting narratives that, and I'm quoting another scholar, legitimize structural violence, rationalize institutional violence, and impersonalize personal violence. These caricatures, Towns says, ooze from the pores of videos and magazines and television and radio and music and the pulpit, end of quote. Seeping into all major American institutions, especially our laws, religious beliefs, and behavior. If you don't, can you feel that down? Let me just do the Erica Badu. Didn't you feel that? I won't call the name, but you know, Twitter, just feel that. These caricatures ooze from the pores of videos and magazines and television, social media and radio and music and the pulpit, seeping into all major American institutions, especially our laws, religious beliefs, and behaviors. One does not have to look far to see the devastating consequences that social media in the hands of robber barons and tyrants can have on the social political narcolepsy of our churches and society. She speaks to the evil that lies coiled up in the toxic academic, political, and cultural narratives that hold consciousness in captivity. She writes, "We are doing the work our souls and intellects must have to stop a fantastic hegemonic imagination that circumscribes learning into narrow and constricting casing. placed within an evil matrix of racism, sexism, classism, transism, anti-Semitism, Islamic phobia, militarism, ageism, and more, and then has the nerve to say this is orthodox, when it really is a robust fear of change, diversity, and the new in the ways we think and how we ask questions and offer answers. Dr. Towns. With Professor Towns, I'm arguing that to engage in this insidious cultural production of evil, it will require congregating, say that with me, conjuring and conspiring in commons by those of us in the academy, churches, and citizens at large who are willing to speak truth to power. It will also require what we live into, what Towns calls the everydayness of moral acts, with a steady, hopeful gaze as we make our runs to the future. She invites us to join her on the run. Listen to her. And we, the people of faith, must live and be witness to a justice wrapped in a love that will not let us go, and a peace that is simply too ornery to give up on us. Not even in the vice grip of the fantastic hegemonic imagination, as it serves as a handmaid and manservant to the cultural production of evil. Then she asks, won't you join me? I'm almost there, people. In Black theoethical discourse and practice, this towering figure, and we have her, she's with us, offers a distinctive approach to how African American communities, and indeed all communities, can engage in congregating, conjuring, and conspiring at critical intersections, the crossings of history, culture, and religion. Her focus is on how Black communities gather to resist Julian oppressive forces and how these commons are imbued with spiritual and ethical significance. Towns' theoethical approach also emphasizes the intersection of faith and justice and the ways in which womanist ethics delves into the spiritual creativity and cultural endurance of Black women. At these crossings, congregating, conjuring, and conspiring become not only acts of survival, but also acts of revolutionary imagination and resistance. Towns, like her historical predecessor, Ida B. Wells, speaks as a powerful and provocative runner, watcher, writer as we enter this season of threat, terror, and triumphalism, and calls us to hope as we join her on the run. Moreover, her conjuring of theoethical praxis recommends a closer look at our existential contexts as crossings, those in-between liminal spaces inhabited by the living dead, running from and running to perilous and promising moments where knowing creeps in like ghosts slipping through the cracks of language and calls us into disruptive, noisy, and messy action. To wake up running for Towns begins with the intentional and delicate art of conjuring and imagining new spaces where Black women are no longer prey, but active participants in their own liberation and destinies. Moreover, it calls forth women and men, trans and queer, old and young, to imagine new pathways to democratic futures through spiritual practice, cultural creativity, and communal care. For Towns and Cone, like their marooned and runaway ancestors, they call us into the nighttime of this dismal moment in American political and cultural anxiety. At the crossings, my friends, of madness and hope, to reimagine new borderlands and hinterlands of our exilic condition. In the words of Catherine McKittrick, we must enter demonic grounds where the poetics of our landscapes invite us to remember, retell, and relive theories, poems, dramatic plays, and historical narratives that disclose Black women's spaces and places, contesting all generalized universals. In order to accomplish this urgent task, we must interrogate the past. Call those names, Dr. Mingle. We must interrogate the past, future, and present at crossings. Those places and spaces of horror and turpitude that simultaneously bear potentialities of broad, expansive, democratic spaces of possibility and hope. Who will watch for us? Who will write and speak for us now? Who will dare to make the long run to new futures? Who will hunt for treasures in the night as we seek new time and new rhythm for our continuing struggles against neoliberal avarice and illicit power? Who will join us? Who will warn us of the dangers that await us at crossings in the nighttime of our world? Who will encourage us to move forward into the night? Can I take one last privilege of 2 minutes? I think that since you all are celebrating Thurman was in love with a white woman named Olive Schreiner. It was posthumous. He'd never met her. She was a South African woman, interestingly enough. Her name was Olive Schreiner. She was a fierce champion of Black South Africans in the late 19th century, early 20th century, right before her death. And she was a feminist before we knew how to say it well. She smoked like a chimney and cussed like a sailor. And Thurman just fell in love with her. He had some problems with her use of language. He criticized that. But he edited in 1973 an anthology of Schreiner's writings entitled A Track to the Water's Edge. I recommend it to anyone who wants to understand Thurman. Before you talk about all of the guys that he studied with, Olive Schreiner speaks to him in many ways. In an excerpt from Schreiner's allegory, Three Dreams in the Desert, a woman who is on the run and seeking the land of freedom is a protagonist, so to speak. At the crossings, she meets an aged figure who personifies reason or wisdom. Reason points her to the land of freedom, which is a dark flowing river. Reason informs her that the journey will involve great suffering and sacrifice. Seminarians, the woman must leave her child whom she has concealed beneath her clothing before she makes her track to the water's edge. Finally, she reaches the bank of the river and she says to reason, "For what do I go to this far land which no one has ever reached? Oh, I am alone, I am utterly alone." And reason, that old one, said to her, "Silence, what do you hear?" And she listened intently and she said, "I hear a sound of feet, 1,000 times 10,000s and thousands of thousands, they beat this way." Reason said, "They are the feet of those that shall follow you. Lead on, make a track to the water's edge. Where you stand, the ground will be beaten flat by 10,000 times 10,000 feet." And reason said, "Have you seen the locusts, how they cross a stream. First one comes down the water edge and is swept away. And then another comes, and then another, and then another. And at last, with their bodies piled up, a bridge is built and the rest pass over. She said, and of those that come first, some are swept away and are heard of no more. Their bodies do not even build the bridge and are swept away and are heard of no more. And what of that? Reason said. They make a track to the water's edge. They make a track to the water's edge. And she said, over that bridge which shall be built with our bodies, who will pass? Reason said, the entire human race. And the woman grasped her staff. And I saw her turn down the dark path to the river. Ashe, amen. And so it is. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Fluker has agreed to take a couple of questions. And so for those who may have a question, won't you ask? Is there another mic that's going to be?
Oh, beautiful. Well, hello, darling. Well, hello. Am I on?
Yes, you are on.
Okay, good.
And so while others are contemplating their question, I do have one. Again, thank you for a phenomenal presentation. What do you say for students who are now in this liminal space called seminary on how best prepare themselves to wake up running?
Thank you. And that's an excellent question, Professor Blunt. Everybody is going to have to make their own decision on where they want to go with this. But I'm convinced that I like that verse out of Habakkuk. Habakkuk. I like that, the righteous. And I don't mean, this purity stuff righteous. I'm not into that at all. But those who seek the holy, who at every moment in their lives they are hoping that they'll bump into something that gives them the answer to part of their quest just to become fully human. That's what I think. The righteous shall live by faith. I'm crowded with memories, I told you here. In 205, that's where we were today. That's the first time I saw Howard Thurman sit down with a group and just ruminate about all kind of things. And he told us the most fascinating story, and I think this is relevant, but I'm old, so call me back in if I go off. He told us about the story of the Blue Cat of Castletown. You might want to find it. It's a little old book, and there's a woman in Vermont who wrote it. That's where Thurman get his stuff on the run. He just pick up stuff. But it's a story of a cat that was born blue but had pink ears. And Thurman said, everybody knows that a cat that is blue and born with pink ears is destined for trouble because it leaves home and it never returns. And we were all sitting and said, what? And then he tells the story. I'll let you find the book. But the cat just ends up in all kinds of spaces, Reginald. And the mother cat is just terrified. In fact, she did everything she could to keep this little kitten from leaving. But on that day when that last little pink It's not hair for cats, is it? What is it? Fur? Just fell out. It was on its way. And guess what? When that pink fur left, the little cat could hear the sound of the river. And I'm convinced that when you hear that, you'll drop your nets and follow. And most of seminary really is about formation. You're going to learn a lot of theology and stuff, but a lot of that you're going to forget unless you stay in the academy and have to use it. But you'll never forget those moments when you heard something or felt something and you were moved in a way. It'll change your life forever. So my word is, listen to the sound of the river. And it'll show up. This is a Thurman thing. I'm trying to be with y'all with. Thurman said, he called it the sound of the genuine. And he says, he wrote me a letter. Let me just tell you all of this. I'll tell all my stuff, I was at Garrett. I was going crazy. I had an apartment. I just met Sharon. Oh. But I was going crazy. I was mad, angry, frustrated, broken, bruised, all of the above. You all think you're broken. I was broke. I mean, money-wise, heartbroken, all of this stuff. And I had met Thurman. I'd gone to a seminar. And so I wrote him and told him what I was going through. I couldn't figure out what I was going to do next. And he wrote me back. I mean, I later discovered he'd write everybody back. But after a millennium, he wrote me back. And it was in hieroglyphics, his handwriting. It took us so long with the papers project just trying to decipher his handwritten notes. But and he wrote me and he said, oh, you're thinking about whether you want to be a lawyer or a preacher. And he said, or whether you want to do a PhD. He said, well, if you do a PhD, make sure you find a teacher. He says, not the institution, find a teacher. He's just going through all of this. And then he said, the most important thing for you, though, is to wait and listen for the sound of the genuine that is within you. When you hear it, that will be your voice. And that will be the voice of God. Whew. That blew me away. I didn't have the slightest idea what he meant. But I felt it. And one mailing day later, I got 3 letters in the mail. I won't tell you the first 2. I started crying and Sharon will be talking about me later, talking me down. But that last letter was an acceptance letter for Boston University. And I had no idea, 1, how to get to Boston. I didn't have any money. And 2, that I someday at Boston University would complete a dissertation on Howard Thurman and Martin King, and later they would give me the blueprint for the rest of my career. And that certainly not becoming the editor of the Thurman paper. But that's my calling. Everybody, you get your, but it's for real. This is not a figment of your imagination. When you hear it, drop your nets, get on the run. And it ain't gonna show up right away unless you're Jesus or one of these people who get the whole thing and stuff. But most of us have to follow the breadcrumbs. Yeah, wherever they lead. Is that helpful? Okay. I don't know how to answer those questions. Blessed.
Hi, my name's Luke.
Luke?
Thank you so much.
Luke from where?
From Kansas City.
Kansas City?
Yeah.
I'm going to
And I'm a Garrett student.
Kansas City.
Yeah.
I've been to Kansas City, man.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's a great spot.
I was at Fort Riley. I had another life. Yeah, man.
Yeah. Okay. I'm from Topeka, technically.
Oh, man, I know Topeka.
Okay.
I might know some of your people.
Maybe. So kind of on the heels of what you just said, like listening for your calling, I guess feels like right now there's a lot coming at us, So how do you not get distracted, which sounds like a bad way to phrase it, but for example, I'm really passionate about Christian education to fight Islamophobia. And like that's like I'm trying really hard to get like zeroed in. But then I came here and I'm listening to you talk, and I'm like, there's all these other causes that I need to help and advocate for, and I don't know what to focus on, I guess.
Yeah, I get it. I feel you.
Okay.
I can't help you. Enjoy it. Wrestle with it. You deserve to wrestle with that. If God showed up every time we call God, I'm sure that, you might have all these things about omnipotence, but I'm not sure about omnipresent. Luke, you got some stuff that you haven't even investigated. You got to unpack it. You got it. I don't think that anybody shows up on the planet without some of the stuff they need to make the journey. And this is a Thurman night now. I'm switching over to Thurman. Thurman said you got to follow the grain in your own wood. That's the way, that's where all of these great sages and these people like that, they always just say something like, follow the grain in your wood. Oh, God, that's funny. But you do. I mean, what is it that you love, man? I mean, what do you love? Also, I know you hate people who are anti-Islam. I'm telling you, have you ever been around folks who are Islamic? You ever prayed in a mosque? You ever been with the people in the community? You go to prayer with them? You might want to think about that. While you're concerned about that, you might want to get to know the people. Most wonderful experience I can name related to interfaith was I was in Egypt, because I'm very old. I've been a few places. But I was in Egypt, outside of Cairo, at the mosque of, I almost said Muhammad Ali. What was Muhammad's? What was his Muslim name? Right, but it has another name. But I had an incredible prayer experience in that community and with the brother who took me in. To be open. And if you say this is a concern that is calling you, let it be. Run to it. And honestly, you're going to have distractions. You're going to mess other folks up if you're not careful. But man, be faithful to what you're hearing. This is deep stuff. Everything ain't up here. Trust me, don't buy Wall Street and Dr. Mingo will tell you the corporate lingo. Mingo, cool. But there's no step formula. We work on it. But listen to the sound of the genuine. And why is this calling you at this time? Might not be what you do later, but go on and jump in the water. You can't swim until you get in the water. I think that's what Philip told the Ethiopian, something like that. Yep.
We'll take one more.
I'm getting sleepy, it's getting late and stuff is funny to me. Just don't know.
Hi, Dr. Fluker. My name is Ellery Hunter. I'm a
Ellery?
Ellery.
Ellery.
Yeah.
Are you from where? I
live here in the Chicago area.
Where are your people from?
My people are from Mississippi.
Where? Because the way you said Ellery, I could hear that. I heard something.
Yeah, Greenwood and
I know Greenwood, Mississippi.
Starkville.
Man, I know Starkville. Starkville is down the road from where I was born. Winona. I was born in Dayton. I wasn't Winona. Winona is the big town. I was about 10 miles outside of Winona.
Right.
Winona is the town where Fannie Lou Hamer, they beat her to death.
Right.
Almost. Yeah. And you weren't far from there.
No, and kind of, my people, and kind of like you, they weren't like in Starkville, for instance.
I know they weren't. I was just signifying. That's called signifying.
Right. Got to name the biggest town around.
Mm-hmm.
But, so I'm a student here at Garrett, and I'm an MTS student currently. So my question really is, you seem to describe Cone as early in his career being, I think you used the term angry, but certainly intense.
No, he was angry. He said
okay.
he was angry, yeah.
Right.
Very angry.
And then you described him later, like in his last book. It sounded almost as if he was more mellow and reevaluating in some sense some of the things that he wrote and that kind of thing early
He
on.
was self-critical. That's what I was saying. But go on with your
My
question.
question is, do you find that to be a trajectory in your own career as you've said that you are?
No, I'm still
older?
mad, man. I be so mad some days I have to catch myself. So I don't believe they said that. Did they say, you talk about microaggression? I said, I don't believe. And so, no, but I'm growing. But James Cone, let me just tell you, this brother, oh God, he was a Christian. Don't ever forget that. He was AME. He was a Christian. You never heard him deny Christianity. Now, some of the rest of the folks in the orbit, we did some other kind of thing, but he was a Christian. James Cone not only invited me to be part of his work at Union, especially with PhD students working on Thurman and King. When I was a student at BU, I believe, I was at the Society for Christian, and I'm saying all this to get to your question. I was at the Society for Christian Ethics, and the Society for the Study of Black Religion, when it was very elite. Only certain people could get in. Yeah, and most of them were male. But Cone sat with me one afternoon, at least 2 or 3 hours, helping me to think through the relationship of King and Malcolm. This is before he started. I mean, he was that interested and invested in students. And you didn't get out of Cone's supervision unless you knew something, right? All of his students would tell you that. Toward the end of his career, we communicated a lot around Thurman. He grew closer and closer to Thurman. In fact, every volume, I sent him a copy, autographed copy. I have the last volume, breaks my heart. I had autographed it for him, but he left us. And what you see is, I like to call it maturation. Christians call it sanctification. He grew. And it takes time for some people. Everybody can't show up smelling good and tasting like a lollipop. I thought his anger was genuine. It was real. It was visceral. And he wrote about it. And he wrote about it over time in more systematic terms. Black power and black theology is kind of him getting it off the press. But then he goes, and the reason why I took so much time in the lecture, if you forgive, I'm so tired of people not giving black theologians their due. We write books too, and we struggle too. And it ain't just Karl Barth and Paul Tillich and all these other folks who have. James Cone deserves this lecture series. I'm telling you, it honors this school as well as it honors him to remember, and Emily Towns. So yeah, he grew wise, not just mellow. He was a very wise person. I have other experience, but I don't want to bore people here. But I've seen him deal with just some stupidity. People asking stupid questions, saying stupid things, and he was so cool. He was so cool, sometimes his clothes looked nervous on him. You didn't know that. Yeah, I thought you were from Mississippi, man. I love James Cone. I loved him.
Can we thank Dr. Fluker one more time? Dr. Jen Harvey is going to come and provide our closing. Let me quickly say, Dr. Fluker said that this could not be done without a team, and he is absolutely right. And so I want to thank Dr. Kate Ott for partnering with CBE, the Stead Center with CBE to make this happen. Thank you to the President's Office. Thank you to Vilma, amen. For all, come on, y'all put your hands together for Vilma. Thank you for our marketing and communications who truly got the word out and flooded social media with this work and making it possible for all those who desire to register to do so. And thank you to all of you who came out again in the wonderful weather of Chicago to be able to be here and present, and to thank all those who are with us virtually. And now we'll have our closing from Dean Harvey.
Imagine I'm not the only one that feels like this has been the kind of feast this whole afternoon and this evening that doesn't leave me or any of us satisfied or lulled towards relaxation, but in fact has me enlivened, has us enlivened and hungry for more and ready to run. So I just want to say, in such a time as this that we are walking through, I am deeply grateful for the living legacies of Dr. James Howell Cone, for the living legacies of Dr. Emilie Maureen Towns, who taught and continue to teach us to congregate, who have conjured and continue to conjure, and who continue to call us to conspire together. I am deeply grateful for living legacies of Black religious thought, Black religious leadership, Black religious practitioners of liberation, and prophets of theoethical vision who meet and lead in the commons and at the crossroads in this very time. So I want to close us by saying a specific thank you to Dr. Reggie Blunt, who indeed, yes, makes things easy, but today for convening and connecting us. I want to say thank you to Dr. Anne-Marie Mingo, for Dr. Anne-Marie Mingo for asking us to consider, is our religion good? And for reminding us that everyday Black women in the civil rights struggle, they didn't know the ending and nonetheless stayed committed. Will we? And finally, of course, thank you, Dr. Walter Fluker, for reminding us to be ready to run, for calling us to the collective act of resisting and constructing and imagining, to the collective struggle, which I will not now forget as the call to breathe together. Thank you for your wisdom and for your wit, for your courageous leadership, your brilliant intellect, and for your theological vision and theoethical vision, and for sharing it so brilliantly with us today and pouring into this community. Finally, Garrett Seminary community, here and online, colleagues, friends, students, my prayer for us as we leave tonight is that we will learn again to boldly name, embrace, live into our differences and diversities, and understand indeed that doing so equips us for the urgent moment. Good night.